at 7:40 p.m. This is the Finance and Operations Committee meeting, Wednesday, January 17th. I'd like to do a roll call. Ms. Van Twyver?
Here.
Mr. Mosher? Mr. Mosher?
Bill, are you still there?
Mr. Mosher is here.
Okay, he is here.
Ms. Oden is here. And Mr. Garino is here. And Mr. Donovan and Dr. Mosley are also in attendance. I believe we have a quorum. And so our first order of business, discussion and recommendation, number one is the donation on the football program. We have some communication that we received a generous donation, total $10,000 from parents for the Nashua High North High School football program. I want to thank the parents and the friends and the alumnus who are supporting the school athletes. Do you want to say anything to this, Mr. Donovan?
Yeah, just that this is the second time we've received this. It's the same parents who, one of the two parents works for a firm who matches anything that they give up to $5,000. So this is the second time we've got the $10,000, and they would like these funds to go directly to the North football program. They listed some items here.
Mm-hmm.
And I suggest that we put this, we have an athletic expendable trust fund, that the funds would go in there and then they can be dispersed through the normal purchase order process through the school department for the football program, with Lisa Gingras, the athletic director, making the final decisions.
Do we need a motion to do that? Or
Yeah, I would probably do a motion to accept the donation and to place the funds in the athletic expendable trust.
So moved.
I second. Yes, please.
In the athletic expendable trust fund.
Okay. All right, so I will take a vote on that. Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
I'm only here if you don't have a quorum. I don't need to vote on this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Garino votes yes, and the motion carries. So again, I want to thank the people that donated to our football team, the Nashua High North. This is what we need. We need a lot of this. So, yes, ma'am.
Can I just ask one question? Have they asked to remain anonymous, and has the company?
Yeah, they haven't asked for any note, so,
Okay.
and they didn't last time.
Okay.
There might be something being done from the school level.
Our football team.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. How generous of them, and the company.
Moving on to second item, which is the Public School Infrastructure Fund. We have a communication from Mr. Donovan about the state of New Hampshire created a fund, and we have some applications for recommended funding for security for some of our schools. Do you want to elaborate on this?
Sure. This is a new fund. Previously, the state had a school building fund where they would cover 20 to 30% of your cost if you did a significant renovation or build a new school. That, back about 5 years ago, during one of the budget crunches, sort of went away. So it hasn't been funded since. There've been discussions up at the state to try to bring that fund back, but due to various budget constraints up there or decisions made up there, they have yet to do that. They have talked about it. They are accepting applications, but there's no funding for it. So I believe this fund was created to handle some of the lower priced items. It uses excess funds at the end of the budget year for them. They take some of the excess funds and they put it into what they call the Public School Infrastructure Fund. It's specifically for three things. It's for sort of the E-rate funding, and if you know what E-rate is, that's Rick Fahrenkoff talks about that. Basically, that's historically been the funds where you pay taxes on your telephone bills. One of the taxes on there goes into this E-rate fund, and then it's shared with schools. And to try to get, the whole idea behind that is to get the internet throughout everywhere, even very rural areas and things like that. But it's also given to schools to help us with our network. So we've been doing that for a while, but that funding has started to reduce too. So at the state level, they're going to be using this public infrastructure fund for some of that. And then the other two things the state decided to use these funds for is also life and safety projects that address deficiencies at schools. Things like fire alarms and issues that students may be at potential risk. We probably don't have any of those. Our schools are in relatively good shape when it comes to significant deficiencies. I don't think we really have any significant deficiencies. So we probably aren't going to have a lot of. I mean, we could have a fire alarm system break down one of the schools, and we could ask for funding that way. But at this point, there's nothing really for us to apply for. And then the third one is the improved security at schools. We can always do that. Chris Lassard, I sent this over to Sean Smith and Chris Lassard at Plant Ops. Chris immediately said, oh, we can use cameras, we can use improvement to our vestibules in some of our schools. We can, and we've taken a look at what other school districts have put in place, and they've come up with a number of different ideas. So we've put in thus far 9 applications. We've been recommended for funding for 7 of those. We're hoping to hear from the other 2 next month. This committee meets every month. And then they're hoping to start actually disperse the funds. They've not done that yet, which is kind of the most important part. But hopefully in the spring of 2018, we should start to see these funds. And basically for the security fund, they're going to pay 80% of the cost.
So how much money are we asking for?
Well, we put in of the 7 of them, it was about 105,000, so we expect to get about 83,000, which is 80% of that number.
You made a comment about the old system and
The old school building fund? Or?
no, yes, thank you.
Yes.
That they talking about bringing that back, but they're accepting applications for it now. Or were you talking about these were the type of...
No, they are accepting, they have applications for the building fund again. So assuming we move forward on the Elm Street project, let's say,
Yeah,
I'll do the application.
Yep.
If there's no funding, it'll just sit there.
yeah.
That decision was made after we had started, the last big project we did was at Sunset Heights.
Mm-hmm.
So the application started after we were well into that project, so that project didn't qualify because of the timing. But going forward, we will put in applications, and if there's any funding, hopefully we can.
But you're not going to put them in now.
Well, you can't put it in until you're a lot closer to actually doing the project.
Oh, that's too bad.
They ask for a lot of information, like give your estimate of cost and breakdown, things like that. So when you've already hired the architect and begun the process, and 20% of a project, the Elm Street project, is going to be a significant sum of money. But I don't know. I'm not up at Concord, so I can't speak to.
How do they usually put that money around the state?
I'm not sure there's any spreading around the state on the school
It's not
building
like first
fund.
come, first serve, or a lottery, or
No, they review each project, and I think if
as
it's,
long as they've got money, they
yeah, we
fill it?
still receive funds from the school building fund. They're still paying what they promised to pay, because basically, if you get a 10-year bond to do a project,
Mhm.
then they pay you so much. You pay you 20% each year. It's not like they pay it all up front. The new fund, what they'd like to do is pay it up front. The problem with doing that is if you're getting 20% right away, then they have fewer people can share the funds. The way they did it, where they take the 10-year bond and they give you 20% of each payment each year, so that you receive so much money a year. It's spread out. But so they're still paying that, and they're going to continue to pay those funds. I think it goes for another 8 years or so.
What about Mount Pleasant? Would you apply for it?
Mount
That-
Pleasant was during the moratorium. So the last project that we did
But it
that
was
we
a
got
new
school
stuff.
building fund was when we did the work at Fairgrounds and Ledge, which was about 5
Yeah, but I
years
thought we
ago.
were gonna work on Elm Street and Mount Pleasant next.
Mount
Was
Pleasant is, we reviewed that. Our suggestion is probably not to do Mount Pleasant next.
Oh.
I think Elm Street is in much more of a need than Mount Pleasant is. Mount Pleasant came to our meeting, stated their case. They now have air conditioning in that building.
Yes, they're
Um,
happy.
But when it comes to the actual building itself, it's in much better shape than Elm is. I think we can't just listen to our parents. We listen to them obviously, but you got to look at which building's in worse
It's a
shape.
high
And
priority.
Elm Street is in much worse shape
Mhm.
versus Mount Pleasant. They could all use things, obviously. They're not-
Yeah.
Does anybody have any other questions regarding this infrastructure fund? Mr. Mosher?
No, but
Okay. I just have a quick question. On these 7 applications, it says recommended funding.
Yes.
Do you have a timeline as to when the projects will be, could begin and from beginning to end, or how long it takes to get it funded and implemented?
Most of these projects we can probably have complete by the end of the summer.
No? Do you need any motion?
No, this was more informational. I
Okay,
think.
great, yep.
So,
I think it's a good idea to use them for security.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good idea.
So we'll continue to put them in and
Mhm.
see how the process goes.
Okay, if nobody has any questions, I'm going to move on to number 3, quarterly credit card report.
Okay.
Where's Mrs. Z?
We do have in the handouts, there's a breakdown, so if anybody has any questions, everything seems to be right here.
Yeah, and if I could just speak to it quickly.
Sure.
This came about with our old friend, Mr. Ryder.
Okay.
He, Mr. Mosher might remember that.
I sure do.
So, at the time, there was a superintendent in a neighboring town who was misusing the school credit card, and he got himself in a little bit of trouble. Maybe a lot of trouble. I don't know exactly what happened to the man, but so during that time, there was a policy put together, and so we report on a quarterly basis to the board. We show you what we've used the credit cards for. We have 2 credit cards in the district. One is in my name, one is in Assistant Director Paul Calabria's name. We don't carry the credit cards around with us. We keep them in safe. We only take them out to use them when they're required to be used. And typically what we use them for is things you need a credit card for. If someone's going to a conference and they need to travel and we're going to be paying for that, or renting cars, things like that, you have to use a credit card. Typically, most things that you buy online, you have to use a credit card for. We don't buy a lot online. We use our process and our accounting system to do that. But occasionally, if something is significantly cheaper online and it makes sense for us to do it, we will use the credit card. So, and as you can see, I showed you the 2016. We spent $33,008, and this year we spent $17,005. So we did spend less using the credit card.
Right.
Good
So,
job. Is it interest bearing?
oh, we pay it off. We don't pay it off. No.
Glad to hear that.
Never want to do that.
If
Maybe a
anybody
black
has-
mark on Mr. Donovan's paper.
If there are no more questions, I'm going to move to number 4, fiscal 2018 December transfer report.
Okay. We have just one transfer. Basically, for those new to the committee, the way the policy is, a transfer entry greater than $5,000 needs to be approved by this committee and the board. But we also we'll show you any transfer entries between 1,000 and 5,000. Those will be in your packet each month. Those are informational. You don't have to approve them or anything. We're just showing you anything over 5,000 you do need to approve. Exactly. So the only transfer we have, it's not over 5,000, and it's simply the CTE program is taking some of its allocated funds that they use for the various supplies, and they're moving it from where they had extra in contracted services and books. They're using it to maintenance and repairs to cover some repair bills needed in the video and production group. So it's simply just they didn't budget enough in there because I don't think they expected these repairs, and so they'll have to move it from one account to the other account.
Okay. Does anyone on the committee have any more questions on the transfer? If not, we're going to move to number 5, fiscal 2018 December financial report.
Okay, we supply each month 2 reports. They're both in this package. The first one is the one I usually run through quickly, and then the second one is the same report except it shows the expenses by account by month. So if you wanted to take a look at trends and things like that, you could do so. And it also, that one also has on it sort of percent used, so the percent of the account that's used. So we're right now, this is a report through December, so we're 6 months through the calendar year, and we're 4 months through the school year. School year, assuming it's 10 months, fiscal, calendar year is obviously 12 months. So some of those percentages are slightly different depending on the type of account it is. But I'll just run through a few things quickly. If anybody has any questions on any accounts, they can ask, and if I know, I'll answer. If not, I can look it up and send it to you. On page 1 of this, obviously the biggest part of the school budget is labor. About 80% of the school budget are these labor accounts. As you can see, it's almost $83 million of the salaries and wages types accounts. So those are the ones that obviously you got to keep your eye on, but there's also a multitude of
83 million total.
Yes. So basically, I always take a look at the wages full time, and I go back and I look at where we were a year ago, and I'll go back and I'll look at the trend one. This month it's a little bit higher than it was in the other 4-week months, but there were some payments in, like the secretaries got a raise, so their salaries went up. A few other things. There was nothing in there that was significant as far as something that really raised an eyebrow, but I did scan it, comparing it to the last 4-week month, which happened to be November. The wages part-time has been pretty steady through the year. No real concerns there. Overtime, I do a sheet each month where I break that overtime down and I share it with, for example, let's say if the middle schools had a lot of overtime, then I'll send that to the principals and or the plant ops, wherever the overtime is, I'll send it out and say, what's going on here? Why so much overtime? And, sometimes it's a very valid reason. But just let them know that I'm watching it and keeping an eye on it. It's after the fact, so it's not as good as before the fact, but I mean, I can't manage all the overtime before it happens.
Mm-hmm.
For the new people, wages per diem, that is the line where all the subs go. Okay, so it's the subs, the daily subs and the long-term subs. So if there's a teacher in for someone for 3 or 4 months, that person gets paid a lot higher than a daily sub does because they take the rate that a teacher would get.
Right.
But both of those line items, they go in there. So about $109,000 for a month in December is pretty typical. Wages elected officials, we pay this board on a quarterly basis, so you'll see $9,000 4 times a year. Hopefully no more than that. The longevity payment, you can see year to date, there's really nothing in there, there's 2 cents, but that payment is being made this month for teachers, which is obviously the biggest piece, for principals. I think everyone that gets longevity is gonna get the payment, I believe, in January, so we'll see it next month. Except for the paras, I think they get paid later in the year. So you'll start to see those numbers come through. Additional hours, most of those dollars are really summer school dollars. So you see most of those dollars spent in July and August. During the year, the other additional hours is when mostly teachers do work outside of the contract and they get that $25 an hour if they're asked to do special things. So that's why you'll always, there's 7,400 in there, so. Stipends, this month it's 100,000, and most of, all of that is for the fall coaches of both of the high schools. Okay, we have a schedule that we pay our coaches on. Middle school coaches were paid last month, high school coaches paid this month. That's what most of that is. So the spend this month looks pretty good. One other thing I'll just mention quickly, that account 51750, retirement separation pay, that's over what we budgeted. And basically what that account is for when all the people leave, all the severance and any unused vacation people have. That all goes into that account. Most of the money each year is the teachers that retire. But we also this year had some
Retire, from
from the district.
June?
Yeah, they retired in June, but the cost, they don't get paid until July or
July,
August.
so it gets
It hits
your
this,
6 month or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, most of your retirement separation pay hits in July and August. But what we did have this year, we had a couple of senior principals left, and they had some significant payments, and we weren't expecting that when we did the budget, so it's, we basically know each teacher, if you're gonna retire, you're supposed to let us know by February 1st. So typically when we're doing the budget, we can take a look and say, okay, the teachers, let's say there's $400,000 worth of teachers, we say, okay, if we budget 800, that should cover all these other things. But there were some people outside of teachers this year that we weren't aware of that had some severance costs. But we have a detail of all that, and it's, it's not surprising at this point it maybe was back in the beginning of the summer. Okay, those next few set accounts, the fringe benefit accounts, the first 3 of those are all they're all budgeted by the city, and the costs that hit are directly from the city. So I don't really worry about that. If these line items are over budget, the city picks up anything over budget. If it's under budget, I don't get to spend it, I gotta give it back to the city. So it's really not areas that I'm too concerned about. And basically, it's sort of allocations of what they're doing anyway, so they sort of estimate it, and then they use that to allocate it on a monthly basis.
Mayor to make us give it back.
Well, it's only fair. It's only fair. And then, so the only line we really manage is the educational assistance, and most of what that is the teachers. A lot of teachers will be taking courses to get their masters, etc. So you'll see this month it's like 15,000 that hit, and then you'll see most of it you'll see in the second half of the year because they don't get paid until they finish the course and get their grade. Okay, the next set of accounts. Nothing too crazy in there. The one account that was a little bit higher was that 53.6 this month, instruction services, was 65,000. And what happened there was the 2 things, the 2 charges, significant charges that hit there. One is the Clearway. We have the 2 Clearway programs, one for the special ed and one for the typical kids. Typical kid monthly payment, which is about $30,000 a month, hits there. So that's what that is, and that you'll see that every month. The other thing is the youth council. A couple years ago, the board added a counselor of some sort. It might have been I'm not sure if it was an alcohol counselor or a drug counselor, some sort of a counselor was added, and we added it as a labor position. We were never able to find someone for the amount we could pay, so the youth council provides that person. And we hadn't paid them at all this year, and so we sort of caught up with them. So that's why that number's higher. That number will go down next month. And then the 53,614, that's a significant number there, but that's typically, those are our OT and PT services. The OT, PT, for most of our special needs, we contract those services out. We don't have internal people that do it. So that's a total of, about, I think, $900,000 a year that we spent on those services. So that's that. Property services, electricity, heating, and water. Typically what I'll do each month is I take a look at what we spent last year at the same time, but really where we are year to date. So year to date in electricity, we spent $848 this year. Last year at the same time, it was $964. So that's a good thing. We do have a lower rate now that we contracted with in advance for our electricity. Same with our heating gas. Heating gas right now is $107,000. Last year it was $125,000. Though, as with most of the utility bills, you're like a month later, so all the cold in December we're going to pay for in January.
I was just gonna say, I'm not looking to see mine.
Yeah, no, this number's going to go way up in January when you see the January bill. And then the water, we're pretty close with the water. It was 72, and now we're at 65. So. Okay, other than that, the second page, there's HVAC maintenance, there's $34,000. That's an agreement that we have with Control Technologies. They do a number of our schools, and that's the second payment on that contract that we had approved with the board a little while
Didn't we
ago.
just approve that in December?
No, it was in December, but it was in the fall, I believe.
Oh,
Other than that, there's, most of those are maintenance type accounts. They're all relatively good shape at this point. The next group, other services, there's the telephone accounts. Our spend there is we're hoping that that's going to start to decrease with the new phone system. Okay, last year, the spend year to date and last year right now is about the same, but the savings that were with the new phone system, we should start to see it in the second half. Because we were putting in the system most of the way, so hopefully, and if not, I'll be knocking on Mr. Farrakhan's door saying, okay, what's going on? Because I'm not 100% sure, but I think what needs to happen is a lot of the copper wires, the old wires we used to use for the direct numbers, we should be able to shut those down and not have to pay for those anymore. That's where I think we're going to save most of the money.
we're still paying?
Well, we were paying for them, we had to pay for them until we put the new phone system
Yeah.
in. And then you keep a couple of them, sort of hard wires, just because right now it's a voice over. If that goes down, you
Voice over
still need to
IP.
have a phone. Yeah, so you still need a phone. So we kept so many in each school for safety reasons.
Not a many.
I don't know exactly, but yeah, it was supposed to be a few.
Can I just ask, we have voice over IP at home. Have they had any problems with it at all?
In the new system?
Mm-hmm.
In the very beginning we did, but I think since then, no. I mean, I haven't had any here, and I haven't heard of a lot of complaints at the schools. After, the first couple days you rolled it out, there were always a few issues at each of the schools, but.
I don't call in as much as I used to, so I can't tell you. I've not had experienced any
Yeah, it should be
problems.
better. Some of the schools were really, the old system, the phones were in pretty bad shape. Like Fairgrounds Elementary, you'd call over there, the thing would cut off all the time. And, so it should be, that shouldn't be happening anymore. So I'm hoping people are happy.
Mr. Mosher. Mr. Mosher, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank you.
I heard him twice.
All right, so the other services, most of it, smaller amounts, smaller budget items. They're all in pretty good shape. You go to the bottom of those, you'll see where the big three are that I call there, the 55, 690, 691, and 694. Those are the two bus lines, the regular transportation and the sped transportation. The transportation, are fine compared to budget at this point. And then our tuition out of district. This is the line item that I can tell you right now is gonna be overrun again. We have budgeted there $4.7 million. Last year, we spent on this line $5.5 million, okay? We meet each month going forward now. We started last month and we'll do it until the end of the year. We meet with the accounting group and the special ed people. We go through, we have a spreadsheet, student by student. We go through to make sure we're getting the bills in. We have a projected cost for each student on that, and then we just track it monthly to make sure that it's kind of making sense. With students like this, sometimes you'll have some coming and going. From a price point of view, I'd like them to be going, but, for their own sake, whatever's right for the child. But basically, you can see in the month of December, there was $622,000. We spent year-to-date 2.4. We're headed much closer to that 5.5 than we are to this budget. Last year I was able to find money in the budget to cover that difference, but that's, it came down to the very last.
What's the percentage spent already?
The percentage spent is
Those are the numbers that I looked at, see if it's
56%.
56, so we just 6% maybe.
A little over, but still, you've got, keep in mind, that's really 4 months. Most of those it's only 4 months. It's not half.
Yeah.
So just to let you know, you'll hear about this every month. You'll hear about the tuition out of district, and we'll see what we can do. Then there's supplies and materials. There's not really too much to say there. I think we're in pretty good shape in most of those accounts. Indirect costs, for those that don't know what that is, basically we have a number of grants. When you do all the facilitation of the grant, you're allowed to take a certain amount that comes back to you in indirect costs, so it's sort of a revenue for us. And based on our total, we have probably about $8 or $9 million worth of grant money that comes in. That we get to, most of that we get this indirect costs, so thus far we've got about $84,000. I think we'll have no problems making that budget on the year. And then the computer equipment, those are fine. You will notice the computer equipment line itself, 71221, has a negative amount year to date. But basically what that was there was a school that budgeted, I believe it was one of the middle schools, budgeted a bunch of equipment that was really computer equipment, and they had budgeted in the miscellaneous equipment line, but they charged it to the right place, which was computer equipment, thus causing the negative number. They'll fix that as time goes on. But there's nothing really wrong with it. They didn't overspend it, they just spent it on a different line. And the way the accounting system works, you can see the 71s, there's 4 accounts there. You can overspend in one of those if you underspend in the other in your budget. So
Doesn't it require a transfer?
it doesn't, if it's within the same. But if it was something in the 68 and the 71, it does require a transfer.
It's only the big number.
Yeah, it's the first 2 digits.
First two digits.
First 2 digits.
Requires a transfer.
And what we tell everyone, charge it to the right place. People are going to make budget mistakes all the time. That's fine. Learn and budget better next year. But charge the thing to the right place. And when we look at actual expenses, we'll know we spent, that was
Get the
computer
realistic.
equipment. It wasn't furniture. Don't put it there just because you budgeted there. Okay, and basically the debt service, that's for we pay that every August, I believe. It's for all the copy machines that we have on a lease. And that's about it.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions about the summary? I don't think anyone has any questions on the financial report. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. Does anyone have any other business or any questions to ask Mr. Donovan?
Not me.
I just have one, and I'm not sure if this is the right appropriate place to do it, but I got an email, actually, the Board of Education got an email from a teacher, I believe she's at New Searles, and I guess what happens is, when school is extended into the summer, she says her classroom is really hot. She claims it's 88 degrees. So I was wondering if, you mentioned you had air conditioning at Mount Pleasant. If there's something that maybe the custodians at that school can get together, put their heads together, and try to find a way to cool down, to help her have a cooler classroom. She mentioned that they rotate the students, they take them out of class, they put them somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. It's in, I think, the front part of the school where the sun kind of beats in there.
Yeah.
There's dehumidification there because there's been a lot of pooling of water. And so we've tried a few things, but I think that's one of the things on Plan Ops radar as far as, do we need to add air conditioning to that part of the building? We haven't made any firm decisions yet, but that is a known issue. Yeah. I mean, if I know about it, it's a known issue.
Mhm.
I mean, let's face it, June 20th, there's many teachers that are complaining, and I live with one of them, okay? They're complaining about it, and I get it, when it gets really warm in June, and when our superintendent decides not to call as many snow days, maybe it won't be a problem, but.
See, that's the problem. I mean, you don't want, you have a problem on one end, it's the weather. You don't control the weather.
Right.
So on the one end in the wintertime, you have to call school. And that makes it's kind of like a domino effect, something else happens.
Yeah.
Dr. Mosley, you had something?
No, I just wanted to echo Dan's.
Yep.
I think I'll just put it on the flip side of this. One of the things that I want to commend Dan and Sean Smith that we've made a commitment to is actually making sure all the classrooms are heated between 68 and 72. And that can be a challenge within itself for a variety of reasons. For example, Mr. Donovan mentioned Elm Middle School that's in significant need of just, I would say, everything. We fast forwarded to the summertime, the people at Elm at Middle School are in need of air conditioning. Many of our schools, and not to minimize that complaint,
Right.
but certainly it's a challenge, not just in this one school, but district-wide. So the question becomes, listen, I'm all for air conditioning as well,
Right.
but how do we prioritize that? So if we put it at New Searles for this one particular teacher, do we now put it at Bicentennial? Do we put it at our middle schools and some of our elementary schools? So what we try to do is prioritize the high needs. We want to make sure some of our specialized classrooms have air conditioning. For example, some of our special education students that are who are medically fragile, who have some significant challenges. We want to make sure that they're comfortable not only during that time, but also during our summer programming as well. When we have summer programming, we want to make sure that our kids are comfortable and they're in air-conditioned classrooms. So it's an ongoing challenge, and I appreciate the feedback that the teacher from New Searles actually gave to us.
Thank you. Okay, well, it's good to know that it's on your radar and you know about it, and you're formulating a plan. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of our agenda. If anyone has any other business, Mr. Mosher, do you have any other business, sir, or questions?
Well, I'm aware of the problem with the air conditioning, and fortunately, one of my recommendations was used there, and made everybody very happy. Now, if we are having a problem in the other school with in the warmer weather, having too much warmth, too much heat, there may be some help that we can look at that's relatively inexpensive with using Mylar on the windows to reflect the sun out, and thereby reducing the amount of solar gain that we have on those windows. I found that to be a problem. Years ago when I was teaching the refrigeration and air conditioning, that you had to look at the whole situation and do a psychometric reading in the room to see what the temperatures and humidity was. So we'll address that problem a little later on this year and see what we can do about it.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Mr. Donovan, as far as solar impact on new soils, have they looked at that? Do you know?
We've actually spent a lot of time in the last 6 to 8 months looking at solar, and you'll probably hear more about it in probably in February. It'll
Right.
probably be we've looked at putting actual units on the buildings, on
Right.
the roofs. There's
Right.
companies very interested in doing that.
I'm talking about reducing the impact of the sun
through
heating
the
the building
film light.
at new soils.
Yeah, I guess that's a possibility. I'm not sure.
Maybe could you
Yeah,
check that out?
I can
with
talk
the
to
custodians
Sean.
and yeah.
Yeah, I'll talk to Sean about that. But
Mylar, you're talking about?
Yeah.
He was talking about reducing the glare,
Yeah, the
using the reflection, reducing the reflection from the sun. That might be a simple fix. That there's not as much sun coming in
Might help.
in the building, and it might help reduce the heat in the summertime.
Yeah, certainly. I'll check it out with the people that know more than I about that.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Thank you very much.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher.
You're welcome.
So I guess we could have a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn this meeting.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, Mr. Donovan. Thank you very much. Dr. Mosley. Oh yes, at 8:22.